Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. In the distant future, humanity had spread across the galaxy, establishing colonies on planets far from Earth. But despite its vast reach, Earth remained the hub of trade, politics, and cultural influence. No one knew that the emergence of a galactic trend was about to send shockwaves through the very fabric of human society. It all began with the Zilnari, a race of otherworldly beings whose beauty and grace were renowned across the stars. They were a physically stunning species, with elongated limbs, shimmering skin that changed color like a chameleon's scales, and hair that flowed like liquid silver. Their culture was matriarchal, and they believed in enhancing their genetic lineage through the perfect blending of physical beauty and intellect. When they first contacted Earth, their intention was simple. They sought alliances, trade, and exploration. But it was one unforeseen development that would spark a massive cultural craze. The Zilnari, aware of the Earth's obsession with aesthetics, were intrigued by humanity's fascination with beauty. After years of research and contact, they made a startling offer. They would visit Earth and allow human men and women to mate with them, creating hybrids. The Zilnari claimed that this would elevate both species, creating new, more advanced beings with unparalleled beauty, intellect, and strength. The proposal sent shockwaves through Earth's media. At first, governments were hesitant. Ethical concerns rose, and some called the offer inhumane or colonial. However, with the promise of galactic influence, resources, and unmatched technology, the pressure mounted. Soon, Earth's political powers fell into line, opening the doors to the Zilnari. Their ships descended on Earth's major cities, greeted by crowds of eager citizens. Humanity's obsession with beauty had never been so potent, and the Zilnari's exotic allure only fueled the fascination. For the first time in history, the concept of alien beauty became a craze, a desire not just to gaze upon these magnificent beings but to possess the opportunity to reproduce with them. This was more than just a physical attraction. It was a deep, primal yearning for superiority, for enhancing the very core of human existence. But not everyone saw this as a blessing. On the fringes of society, a growing resistance movement began to form. This faction, calling themselves the Eternalists, believed that humanity should rely on its own evolution and that the idea of hybridizing with an alien species was both dangerous and unnatural. They viewed the Zilnari as opportunists, preying on human vulnerabilities, and they vowed to stop the hybridization process at all costs. Still, the allure of the Zilnari was undeniable. Human celebrities, from actors to politicians, began to openly display their relationships with the aliens. Social media erupted with images and videos of these unions, showcasing the beauty and grace of the Zilnari, their almost otherworldly poise that made them seem more divine than mortal. Within months, Earth's fashion trends, entertainment industries, and even the beauty standards were irrevocably influenced by the Zilnari. The craze escalates. The frenzy reached a fever pitch. Human men and women were lining up to meet the Zilnari, with matchmaking agencies popping up in every major city, claiming they could connect individuals to the most desirable Zilnari partners. It wasn't long before Earth's government and private sector began to exploit this new cultural phenomenon, creating a booming industry around Zilnari human hybridization. The demand for such hybrids, beings with perfect human form and the exotic features of the Zilnari, was astronomical. People began paying exorbitant amounts of money for the chance to mate with the aliens, and even more for the resulting offspring. These hybrid children, though genetically enhanced, retained all the charm and allure of their Zilnari parentage, leading many to claim they were the next step in human evolution. However, the reality of hybrid reproduction was far more complex than the public was led to believe. The offspring of the Zilnari and humans did not always inherit the perfect traits that people had dreamed of. Some of the children exhibited unexpected physical deformities, while others struggled with the mental demands of being a hybrid. The media, however, kept promoting the fantasy of flawless, angelic beings born from the union of two species, further exacerbating the craze. In the streets, the first wave of hybrid children were treated like royalty. They were paraded on social media, given sponsorships, and even curated into special schools designed to nurture their exceptional abilities. There were whispers, however, of darker sides to this phenomenon. Some of the hybrids had developed strange abilities, heightened senses, telepathy, and, in rare cases, strange bursts of energy that could not be explained by current science. These anomalies were kept under wraps, and the public remained oblivious to the potential dangers. Meanwhile, Earth's governments had begun to benefit greatly from the Zilnari alliance. In exchange for providing opportunities for hybridization, Earth gained access to advanced technologies that made their society more efficient, more powerful. However, there was a dark undercurrent to these agreements. Many in the government began to suspect that the Zilnari were not just interested in a cultural exchange. They had quietly begun collecting data on humanity's weaknesses, looking for ways to manipulate the Earth's leaders into a deeper, more submissive role within the galactic community. The economic shift. As the demand for hybrid offspring surged, a booming market emerged around the business of selling Zilnari services. Elite matchmaking services flourished, promising the highest quality offspring and exclusive access to the Zilnari themselves. Celebrities, billionaires, and even politicians were willing to pay exorbitant amounts to mate with the aliens, believing that doing so would grant them a sense of superiority, a physical and social edge in a world that was rapidly changing. The marketplace began to commodify beauty itself, taking the Zilnari promise and turning it into a transactional affair. The public was fed a constant stream of glamorous advertisements showcasing the most pristine, beautiful hybrids, some even claiming to be descendants of the most famous Zilnari figures. Every aspect of society was now centered around the breeding of these superior beings. Yet, as the obsession grew, so did the whispers of exploitation. People began to wonder if the Zilnari had not simply come to Earth to promote cross-species harmony, but to feed off humanity's obsession with perfection, slowly guiding them into an economic and cultural dependency. They didn't just offer beauty, they offered power, with each new hybrid union strengthening their hold on the human race. As Earth fell deeper into the alien craze, it became clear, the Zilnari weren't just offering to elevate humanity. They were subtly taking control. The first hybrid children had arrived in a grand spectacle, heralded by the media as the dawn of a new era for humanity. The Zilnari's influence on Earth was undeniable. Their ships hovered above every major city, and the streets were lined with advertisements showcasing the ethereal beauty of their offspring. People spoke of the hybrids as if they were the next evolutionary step, products of a perfect union between the best qualities of two species. The world had fallen into a frenzy. At first, the hybrids were celebrated as the epitome of human ambition. The children born of these unions often exhibited exceptional intelligence, beauty, and strength. Their elongated features, iridescent skin, and luminescent eyes became the ultimate symbols of wealth and status. Celebrities, politicians, and business tycoons, who had paid astronomical sums for the privilege of fathering or birthing these beings, displayed their hybrid children proudly, parading them through media channels and public events. However, the novelty soon wore off as the first cracks in the veneer of perfection began to show. The uneven gift of perfection. As the years passed, the hybrids began to grow. At first there was nothing but awe. A group of hybrid children, raised in specially designed schools for their unique abilities, showed remarkable potential. Some had telepathic capabilities, while others demonstrated extraordinary physical prowess. These abilities were beyond anything humanity had witnessed before. A few hybrid children could even manipulate objects with their minds, while others could read and influence thoughts. They were seen as prodigies born to lead the world into a new age. But as more hybrids reached maturity, it became evident that not all of them were endowed with these extraordinary abilities. Some appeared almost human, with few traces of their Zilnari lineage, while others exhibited strange and inexplicable side effects. A small percentage of hybrids had developed mental conditions, as the merging of human and Zilnari DNA did not always produce the desired results. Some were born with heightened aggression, their minds unable to handle the strain of the dual genetic inheritance. Others found themselves caught in an emotional and psychological maelstrom, struggling to reconcile the human and Zilnari parts of their identities. The hybrids who didn't conform to the idealized image of perfection were quietly tucked away in the background, their stories erased from the public eye. The media continued to promote only the flawless specimens, presenting them as a symbol of the future, a vision of humanity's potential. The dark truth, however, was that these so-called imperfect hybrids were growing in number, and their lives were becoming increasingly difficult. The rise of the hybrid elite. As the hybrids aged, a hierarchy began to form. A select group of hybrids, those with the most striking appearance or the most powerful abilities, became a new class of elites. These hybrids were prized commodities, sought after by the wealthy and powerful for their rare genes. Companies and political organizations began to actively cultivate relationships with these hybrids, seeing them as assets, tools to achieve greater influence and power. The hybrid elite was treated as royalty, living in lavish estates, surrounded by bodyguards and adoring fans. Their every move was broadcast across the world, and they became symbols of Earth's new status within the galactic community. They represented the best of both worlds, human and Zilnari, and their unique qualities gave them a special place in a society that was increasingly obsessed with genetic perfection. Meanwhile, the less fortunate hybrids, those who didn't fit the ideal mold, were relegated to the fringes of society. Some were abandoned by their human parents who had expected more from the union, while others were taken in by secret organizations that promised to help them develop their abilities in exchange for loyalty. These hybrids, far from enjoying the luxuries of their elite counterparts, were subjected to experiments, both scientific and psychological, as humanity sought to unlock the full potential of the Zilnari human union. The more powerful hybrid families, those with ties to the highest echelons of Earth's political and corporate structures, began to consolidate their influence. They saw the growing division between the elite and the marginalized hybrids as an opportunity to shape the future of Earth. These families formed secret alliances, creating a new hidden power structure that was almost entirely controlled by the hybrids. They were, after all, the true heirs to the future, the beings who represented the perfect blending of two species: resistance and rebellion. On the other side of the spectrum, resistance to the hybridization process began to grow. The Eternalists, the fringe movement that had once been dismissed as radical, now found a growing following. People who had once been open to the Zilnari's promises of beauty and power began to see the darker side of the hybrid craze. The promise of evolution, of a perfect new world, was slowly being replaced by a harsh reality. There were whispers of corruption, of an elitist power structure built on the backs of the hybrid children. Many human citizens began to feel increasingly alienated by the growing divide between the hybrid elite and the rest of humanity. The Eternalists, who had once been considered fanatics, found a powerful new ally in the marginalized hybrids. These hybrids, who had suffered under the weight of their unnatural creation, were eager to join the resistance, hoping to reclaim their place in a world that had once promised them greatness but instead left them broken and discarded. In secret meetings held in the shadows of Earth's sprawling metropolises, a rebellion began to form. The marginalized hybrids, tired of being treated as mere tools for exploitation, began to fight back. They had the abilities, some were telekinetic, others had heightened senses, but more than that, they had the anger of being betrayed by the very people who had once hailed their existence as a new dawn for humanity. The rebellion's leaders spoke of overthrowing the hybrid elites, of returning Earth to its rightful rulers, humanity itself. They saw the Zilnari not as allies, but as manipulators who had turned Earth into a breeding ground for their own advantage. The rebellion was small at first, but its numbers were growing. And, perhaps more importantly, their influence was starting to seep into the larger social fabric. Protests broke out in major cities, calling for an end to the hybridization process. News outlets, some previously complicit in promoting the hybrid craze, began to question the ethics of the hybrid's existence. Was this truly the future of humanity, or had Earth become a laboratory for an alien species with far-reaching ambitions? The hybrid conundrum. Meanwhile, the Zilnari watched from afar, maintaining their presence but not intervening directly. They had made it clear from the start that they were not concerned with Earth's internal politics. They had come for the long-term gain of their species, and they would manipulate humanity as needed to achieve their goals. The hybrid children had been their most successful creation, but the cracks were beginning to show. Even among the most perfect hybrids, there were signs that they were growing restless. Their enhanced intellect and abilities, coupled with the emotional turmoil of their hybrid nature, made them question their place in the world. They were not content being pawns in a game of interstellar politics. In the heart of this growing unrest, a young hybrid named Alicia, whose telepathic abilities were unmatched, began to emerge as a leader. She had grown up in the shadow of her famous hybrid relatives, only to be cast aside due to her lack of the expected powers. But now, with her abilities to influence minds and emotions, she had the power to rally others. Alicia was no longer content to simply exist as a part of someone else's dream. She wanted to define her own future. And so the stage was set. The rebellion was gaining momentum. The hybrid elite, backed by their human patrons, held tight to their power. But Alicia and the growing resistance had begun to carve out their own path. A path that would soon lead to a confrontation between the old world order and the new generation of hybrids who refused to be controlled. The tension in Earth's capital cities was palpable. Protests had become a daily occurrence, and the government struggled to maintain control over a population increasingly divided between those who embraced the hybridization craze and those who saw it as a betrayal of humanity's natural course. The hybrid elite, meanwhile, seemed to grow in power, using their otherworldly gifts to sway politics, business and media in their favor. At the heart of this growing unrest was Alicia, the young hybrid with unmatched telepathic abilities. She had quietly become a symbol of the rebellion, not through force or violence, but through her ability to connect with the marginalized hybrids and humans who felt powerless in the face of the New World Order. Alicia's power was subtle but profound. She could hear the doubts, the frustrations, the whispers of those who had long been silenced. And now she was learning to amplify those voices, sending messages of hope to the resistance. Alicia had grown up in the shadow of her perfect hybrid cousins. She was born into a prominent family of hybrids, many of whom were celebrated for their beauty and their abilities. Yet, unlike her relatives, Alicia had not inherited the glowing silver skin or the enhanced strength. Her features, though elegant, were human, and her powers, though formidable, were not as overtly impressive as those of her peers. For years she had been overlooked, hidden away from the media spotlight, pushed aside in favor of more photogenic hybrids. But Alicia had never been one to accept her place. She had spent years studying the intricacies of telepathy, perfecting her skills and learning to communicate with others in ways that were both profound and personal. It was through this connection that she discovered the true extent of the rebellion. There were more of them than she had realized. Other hybrids who were beginning to question their purpose, who had begun to see themselves not as objects to be exploited but as people with their own desires and aspirations. And most importantly, there were humans who, having seen the cracks in the hybridization process, had come to believe that the Zilnari had come to Earth for their own purposes, manipulating humanity into a position of weakness. Alicia's telepathy allowed her to reach across vast distances, to connect minds and hearts in a way that no one had expected. She could sense the growing resistance in the hearts of humans and hybrids alike. Together, they were beginning to understand that the Zilnari had not simply offered an evolutionary gift, they had sown the seeds of division and control. A web of secrets. As Alicia's influence spread, so too did the information about the true motives of the Zilnari. For years, the alien species had kept their intentions hidden, presenting themselves as benevolent visitors, eager to help humanity reach its full potential. They had given Earth new technologies, elevated its status among the galactic community and promised prosperity. But there was more to their presence than anyone had realized. Alicia and the rebellion's leaders began to piece together the truth. The Zilnari had not come to Earth to help humanity evolve, they had come to use Earth as a breeding ground for their own agenda. The hybrids were not just a product of a romantic interspecies exchange, but a means to a more sinister end. The Zilnari were crafting a new generation of hybrids to serve as their future emissaries, leaders and even soldiers. These hybrid beings, gifted with the best qualities of both species, were being groomed to infiltrate the highest levels of Earth's power structure, making it easier for the Zilnari to manipulate humanity from the inside. Through their advanced technologies, the Zilnari had been subtly altering Earth's politics, economics and media, pushing the world closer to a state of dependence on their resources and influence. The hybrids, whether they realized it or not, were being used as pawns in a far-reaching plan to create a world that would serve the Zilnari's interests. A world in which humanity's sovereignty was no more than an illusion. The more Alicia learned, the more determined she became to stop it. But she knew she couldn't do it alone. The rebellion needed allies, both from within the hybrid community and from the human population, who were growing increasingly disillusioned with the system that had allowed the Zilnari to gain so much power. A daring alliance. The next step in the rebellion's plan was to forge an alliance with the most powerful faction of humans opposed to the Zilnari, the anti-hybrid political group known as the Sentinels. The Sentinels were once considered radicals, extremists who railed against the idea of hybridization and the growing power of the Zilnari. But in recent months, they had gained significant traction, their message resonating with a populace that was tired of being controlled by alien forces. Alicia, using her telepathic abilities, made contact with a high-ranking Sentinel leader named Julian Veers. He was a former military strategist who had become one of the most vocal critics of the Zilnari human hybridization program. Though he had once been an advocate for peaceful coexistence between species, his experiences with the political manipulation and the growing rift between humans and hybrids had turned him into a fierce opponent of the Zilnari presence on Earth. The meeting was arranged in secret, far away from the eyes of the media and the government. Alicia and Julian met in an abandoned warehouse, a location that would allow them to speak without fear of surveillance. "I know what you're thinking," Julian said, his voice steady but firm. "The Zilnari didn't come here to help us. They came here to manipulate us and now they're using the hybrids to do it. But what can we do? We're already so deep in their web. We've lost so much control." Alicia looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly with a soft, silvery light. You're right. We've been manipulated. But the hybrids, they are our chance to fight back. Many of them are starting to see the truth. They may not have been born with the power they expected, but they have something stronger than any ability, their will. Together, we can unite the hybrids and the humans who are still willing to fight for our world. Julian leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And how do we begin? First, we expose the Zilnari's plan. We let the public see the truth about what's really happening. We show them how the hybrid program is a smokescreen for their real goal, the subjugation of humanity, Alicia said, her voice low but filled with conviction. It won't be easy, Julian warned. The media is controlled. The government is compromised. They'll do everything in their power to keep this quiet. Alicia's eyes flashed. Then we make it impossible for them to ignore us. The turning point. With the alliance formed, the rebellion began its next phase, exposing the Zilnari's true agenda. Alicia's telepathic reach allowed her to infiltrate the minds of key figures, planting seeds of doubt and resistance. The Sentinels began to distribute evidence of the Zilnari's manipulation, hacking into media outlets and government channels to broadcast the truth. At first, the authorities tried to suppress the rebellion's efforts, but as the movement grew, it became harder to contain. People began to question the narrative they had been fed for years. Was the hybridization program truly a gift from the Zilnari, or was it a calculated move to control humanity's future? The war for Earth's soul had begun, and Alicia and the rebellion were determined to win. The public backlash against the Zilnari was intensifying. The truth, as it always does, began to worm its way into the light. Alicia and Julian's alliance with the Sentinels was proving to be more potent than they had initially anticipated. Their coordinated efforts had led to a surge in support for the rebellion, especially among the disenfranchised, who had long felt like pawns in a game they didn't fully understand. Across Earth, protests erupted and resistance cells began to grow bolder in their actions. The more the rebellion spread, the harder it became for the Zilnari and their hybrid allies to maintain control. The Sentinels' media campaign, aided by Alicia's telepathic influence, reached millions. Leaked government documents and hacked communications revealed the truth behind the hybridization program. It wasn't just about creating beautiful beings or fostering peace between species. It was about controlling the next generation of humanity, bending Earth to the Zilnari's will, and ensuring that the hybrid elite would inherit the keys to global power. Now the Zilnari's perfect facade was crumbling. Their technology, once seen as a marvel, was being questioned. Rumors spread that the alien technology had been used not just to advance humanity, but to manipulate and monitor every aspect of society. People started to see the Zilnari for what they truly were, a powerful alien species looking to extend their dominance through subterfuge. The cost of truth. Yet, exposing the Zilnari's plan came at a cost. The rebellion was growing, but so too was the military might of the hybrid elite. The hybrid leaders, many of whom had been raised in privileged environments, controlled vast swaths of Earth's economy and political power. They were not content to stand idly by while their status was threatened. The elites, though not as numerous as the resistance, had one thing the rebellion could not easily match: power. The hybrids, imbued with both Zilnari enhancements and human intellect, were formidable adversaries. The rebellion faced constant skirmishes as the elite hybrids used their abilities to suppress protests, infiltrate resistance cells, and destroy critical infrastructure. In retaliation, the resistance began to take more drastic measures. Sabotage missions became routine. Zilnari technology was hacked, government buildings attacked, and hybrid-controlled media outlets were sabotaged. While these actions were effective, they came with heavy casualties. Alicia, who had become the unofficial face of the rebellion, struggled with the toll the war was taking. She had known that the truth would be a weapon, but she hadn't anticipated the price that would come with it. People were dying, both human and hybrid, and the streets were filled with the wreckage of a world caught between two sides. She found herself in a moment of quiet contemplation, gazing out from the safe house where she and Julian had set up their headquarters. Her mind, sharp and focused, reached out to the minds of her fellow rebels, trying to gauge their resolve. The resistance's heartbeat. Julian's voice broke her concentration. "We've got a situation." Alicia turned to him, her brow furrowed. "What's happened?" "The elite hybrids are rallying their forces. We've learned they've set up a strike team, highly trained, highly dangerous," Julian said, his face grim. "They're coming for us." Alicia nodded, her eyes hardening. She had anticipated something like this. The hybrid elites would not allow their carefully constructed world to collapse without a fight. She could feel the surge of emotion from the minds of the rebels, a mix of fear, determination, and resolve. But Alicia knew that fear could be harnessed. In the right hands it could become a weapon. "I'll rally the resistance," she said, her voice calm but filled with an intensity that resonated through the room. "We need to hit them first. We can't wait for them to come to us." Julian met her gaze, his expression resolute. "I'll assemble the strike teams. We'll hit them at their most vulnerable points." A plan for the future. The rebellion had come a long way since its early days, when it had been nothing more than a handful of dissidents and fringe thinkers. Now it was a full-fledged movement unified by a singular goal: to take back control of Earth from the Zilnari and their hybrid collaborators. Alicia, more than anyone, had become the symbol of their struggle. Her telepathic powers had become the linchpin that tied the rebellion together, allowing them to communicate covertly and coordinate their efforts in ways no human or hybrid force could anticipate. But as the resistance prepared for the next phase of their war, Alicia knew that the battle they were about to wage would be unlike anything they had faced before. The hybrid elite were not just enemies, they were the next generation of Earth's rulers. Defeating them would require more than strategy. It would require understanding the very nature of the hybridization process itself. Alicia had learned that the Zilnari's manipulation of the hybrid program was not simply genetic. There was something deeper, something more insidious. The Zilnari had embedded a form of mental control within the hybrid DNA. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it had allowed the Zilnari to influence the behavior of hybrid children, pushing them toward loyalty and obedience. Those hybrids who had escaped this influence were the exceptions, not the rule. The rebellion's greatest challenge now was not simply defeating the hybrid elite, but breaking the mental control that had been ingrained in the very fabric of the hybrid's existence. The Zilnari's influence on their minds could be broken, but only if they could reach the core of the hybrid consciousness, the part of them that had been shaped by Zilnari willpower. It was a daunting task, but Alicia knew she had the key. She was different from the other hybrids. Her telepathic powers allowed her to see into the minds of the hybrid elite, to touch their thoughts, to feel their deepest fears and desires. She had the ability to break through their mental defenses. The question, however, was whether she could do it in time. The final countdown. As the strike teams readied themselves for action, Alicia sat in a darkened room, her mind reaching out to the hybrid elites. She was searching, probing, trying to find the one key figure who could turn the tide of the war. Her thoughts reached the mind of Amara, the most powerful hybrid leader, a woman who had risen to prominence through sheer strength of will and ruthless ambition. Amara was the face of the hybrid elite, the one who had orchestrated the consolidation of their power. Alicia knew that if she could reach Amara, if she could break through her mental defenses, the entire hybrid faction could be fractured. For a moment, Alicia's mind touched Amara's. The contact was brief, but the impact was profound. She could feel the mental chains that bound Amara, the subtle tug of the Zilnari's influence. But there was something else, something that Alicia hadn't expected. Underneath the layers of control, there was a flicker of doubt, a moment of hesitation. Amara was not entirely loyal to the Zilnari. She had doubts. She was a product of the Zilnari's plan, but she was not their puppet. That hesitation was enough. Alicia focused all her energy on Amara, pushing deeper into her mind, shattering the walls of manipulation that the Zilnari had built. The hybrid's dilemma. Amara's thoughts wavered. Alicia could sense the internal struggle, the turmoil. She pushed harder, showing Amara the truth, about the Zilnari's manipulation, about the cost of their control, and about the rebellion that was now rising against them. For the first time, Amara's mind opened and she saw the truth. Amara's mind was a battleground. Alicia could feel the fight taking place within her, as if the walls that had long confined the hybrid leader's thoughts were crumbling one brick at a time. Alicia pressed deeper, her telepathic powers now guiding Amara's perception toward the truth the Zilnari had hidden from her all her life. In the beginning, it had all seemed so clear to Amara. She had been one of the first hybrids, a child of the Zilnari's great experiment, born to bridge the gap between humanity and their alien visitors. She had grown up in luxury, celebrated for her beauty, her strength, her intellect. She had never questioned the Zilnari's motives, believing them to be benevolent, seeing herself as their chosen representative, the living proof of their goodwill. But now, as Alicia delved deeper, she began to see the cracks in the foundation of Amara's beliefs. She saw the moments of doubt that had always lurked beneath the surface, the questions she had never voiced, the uncomfortable truths she had buried deep within her. For the first time, Amara realized the full extent of the Zilnari's manipulation. She saw the strings they had pulled, the way they had subtly guided her thoughts, planted seeds of loyalty, and controlled her actions with an invisible hand. The life she had led, the power she had wielded, it had all been part of a grand scheme to create the perfect leader, one who would serve their interests and pave the way for their domination of Earth. The turning point. Alicia's presence was like a mirror, reflecting the truth that Amara had been too afraid to confront. It was an overwhelming revelation, one that sent a shockwave through the hybrid leader's mind. For the first time in her life, Amara felt free, not because of her strength or power but because she had the clarity to see the choices before her. But the clarity came at a price. Amara had been molded by the Zilnari to be a weapon, and the sudden surge of awareness left her reeling. She could feel the guilt and shame flooding through her, the overwhelming realization that she had been complicit in the subjugation of humanity, that she had helped the Zilnari maintain their stranglehold on Earth. In that moment of vulnerability, Alicia took a step back, giving Amara the space to make her own decision. The choice was hers to make, and Alicia knew that forcing her would only push her further into the arms of the Zilnari. But Alicia had done what she set out to do. She had shattered the chains of manipulation, leaving Amara to confront her own conscience. Amara's thoughts trembled as she processed the truth. Alicia could feel her internal struggle, the hesitation. And then, after what felt like an eternity, Amara's thoughts reached out to Alicia, not in fear or anger but in understanding. "You're right," Amara's voice echoed in Alicia's mind. "I've been a fool. I've played into their hands, helped them build a future that never belonged to me, or to anyone. I was so blind." Alicia allowed a moment of silence to pass between them before responding. "We all have our part to play in this. But it's never too late to change. You can still fight, Amara. You have the power to make things right." Amara's mind was still reeling, but there was something different now, something new. The loyalty she had once felt for the Zilnari had fractured. In its place, there was a seed of rebellion, a desire to put an end to the alien manipulation and give Earth back to its people. "I'm with you," Amara finally said. "Tell me what to do." Revolution's catalyst. Amara's defection was a game-changer. She was not just a high-ranking hybrid leader, she was one of the most influential figures in the elite faction. Her defection sent shockwaves through the ranks of the hybrid elite, shaking their confidence and causing fractures in their once unified front. Alicia knew that Amara's turn against the Zilnari would be a powerful symbol for the rebellion, but it was also a risk. There would be those among the hybrid elites who would see her as a traitor, and they would stop at nothing to eliminate her. Alicia had no doubt that the Zilnari would retaliate swiftly, but she also knew that they had just gained one of the most powerful allies in their fight. Amara's knowledge of the Zilnari's tactics, their technologies, and their control mechanisms would prove invaluable to the rebellion. With Amara's help, the resistance had gained access to a wealth of critical intelligence. Amara knew the Zilnari's weaknesses, their blind spots, and their key infrastructure. The rebellion could now target those vulnerabilities with precision. The next phase of their plan was taking shape, and it was going to be a fight unlike any they had fought before. Unlikely alliances. The rebellion began to coalesce around Amara's defection. News of her betrayal spread like wildfire, and soon, other hybrids began to question their place in the world. If Amara, the most loyal of the hybrids, could be swayed, then perhaps others could be too. Alicia's telepathic reach extended further than ever before, and she was able to tap into the minds of the hybrids who had been quietly questioning the Zilnari's motives. Many of them had been born into a world where they were told they were superior, destined to lead and protect humanity. But the truth had shattered that illusion, and they now stood at a crossroads. Some were ready to join the rebellion immediately, while others needed more time to process the truth. But what mattered was that the tide was turning. The Zilnari no longer held the unquestioned loyalty of the hybrids. Alicia could feel the shift in the air, a collective awakening, a realization that they were not simply the pawns of the Zilnari. They had their own agency, their own choices to make. At the same time, the human factions who had supported the rebellion were beginning to see the potential for unity between humans and hybrids. The lines between them had blurred, and they were no longer enemies. They were allies, bound by a common cause: to reclaim Earth from the alien influence that had held it in its grip for far too long. The rebellion's next target was clear: the heart of the Zilnari's power. Their central command, located deep within a hidden base on Earth, was the source of their control over the hybrid population. It was here that they manipulated the minds of the hybrids, ensuring their loyalty through subtle genetic modifications and psychic influence. The final assault. In the days that followed, the rebellion, now more united than ever, began preparing for the final assault on the Zilnari's stronghold. Alicia knew the battle would be fierce and the stakes were higher than ever. The Zilnari would not go down without a fight, and the hybrid elites, though fractured, still had the means to defend their new world order. But Alicia was resolute. The rebellion had gained an edge, and they would not stop until they had taken back what was rightfully theirs. In the midst of their preparations, Alicia sat alone in a quiet room, her mind drifting to the final confrontation. She could feel the pull of destiny, a sense of inevitability. The war for Earth was nearing its climax, and whether they succeeded or failed, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The rebellion had come too far to turn back now. Every moment, every calculated move brought them closer to the heart of the Zilnari Empire. Alicia stood in the war room of their newly established base of operations, watching as the final stages of their plan took shape. Maps of the Zilnari stronghold were spread out before her, highlighting weak points, areas of heavy resistance, and key systems they would need to neutralize. This mission would not just be a victory, it would be the end of an era. Across the room, Amara stood at attention, her expression hard but determined. She had become a vital part of the rebellion's inner circle, offering invaluable insights into the inner workings of the Zilnari and the hybrid elite. In her, they had gained a powerful ally who knew the enemy better than any human could. She was no longer the cold, distant leader of the hybrid elite. She was a warrior ready to sacrifice everything for Earth's future. "I've made contact with the sleeper agents inside the stronghold," Amara said, her voice steady. "They've confirmed the Zilnari are preparing for a major counteroffensive, but there's a gap in their defenses. Their central command is heavily guarded, but we still have a window of opportunity to strike." Alicia nodded. "We hit them hard and fast. Once we take down their communication and defense systems, the rest of the stronghold will fall. The hybrids who still stand with them will be left with no support." "Agreed," Amara said. "But we have to be careful. Their reaction time is faster than we anticipated. They'll send reinforcements from other sectors, and if we're not quick enough, we'll be outnumbered." Julian, who had been silent up until now, spoke up from the corner of the room. "We're ready. The strike teams are prepped, the ships are fueled, and we've got the diversionary tactics in place. Once we breach their gates, we'll have a clear path to their central hub." Alicia's eyes flicked between Julian and Amara, both of whom had become indispensable to the rebellion's success. She felt a surge of gratitude. She was no longer alone in this fight. The loss of so many had hurt, but each new alliance, each new face in the fight, made her believe again that Earth could be free. She took a deep breath and turned back to the map. "We strike at dawn. This ends now." The following hours passed in a blur of final preparations. The rebellion's forces, a mix of humans and defected hybrids, mobilized swiftly, each group assigned a specific target. Some would focus on disabling the Zilnari's communication towers, ensuring that no reinforcements could reach the stronghold in time. Others would infiltrate the base's lower levels, sabotaging critical infrastructure that the Zilnari depended on. Meanwhile, the elite strike teams would engage the central command. Alicia had been briefed on the Zilnari's defenses, and she knew exactly where to strike. Her telepathic abilities were crucial in this moment, allowing her to sense the shifting dynamics of the battlefield in real time. Every step they took was calculated. The timing had to be flawless. As night fell, Alicia stood atop a ridge, overlooking the sprawling Zilnari stronghold. The distant silhouette of the fortress loomed like a shadow, its cold, metallic surface reflecting the faint light of Earth's moon. The air was thick with tension, but there was a quiet certainty in the air. "This is it," Julian said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "We either win or die trying." Alicia met his gaze, her heart steady. "We win." The assault began with the sound of stealth ships cutting through the night sky. The first wave of rebellion fighters descended on the outskirts of the stronghold, setting off explosions that sent shockwaves through the enemy's outer defenses. The Zilnari, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. Their automated systems began to activate, but by then it was too late. The rebellion had already begun its infiltration. Inside the stronghold, Alicia's mind was sharp, reaching out to her strike teams with silent commands. She could sense the movement of the Zilnari troops through the complex, feeling their confusion, their panic. They were not prepared for this. The rebellion's assault was relentless. Every strike was precise, every action calculated. It was a well-oiled machine, a testament to how far they had come. Julian's voice came through her earpiece. "We're at the gates. We're breaching the first layer of defense." Alicia's pulse quickened. This was it. The moment they'd all been fighting for was now unfolding. As they moved deeper into the heart of the base, the atmosphere grew colder, the sterile alien architecture more oppressive. The central command was just ahead. Alicia could feel the presence of the Zilnari commanders, leaders who had maintained their iron grip on Earth for so long. She focused her mind, pushing her telepathic abilities to their limits, trying to break through their defenses before they could mount a counterattack. In the control room, the Zilnari commanders were already mobilizing. "Send reinforcements to the lower levels," one of them ordered. "Activate the core defense systems. We cannot let them breach the central hub." But Alicia was faster. She reached into the mind of one of the Zilnari leaders, overriding their thoughts with a simple command: "Stop." The resistance wasn't just physical, it was mental warfare. Alicia's powers had evolved. She could now disable entire systems by cutting off their mental pathways, severing their connection to the control network. The command room fell into disarray as the Zilnari found themselves unable to issue orders, their control slipping away. Without their ability to communicate or coordinate, the once unified Zilnari forces were quickly disbanding. Meanwhile, Amara led a team of defected hybrids straight for the heart of the command center. Her presence was a beacon of defiance. The remaining loyalist hybrids hesitated as they saw their once unassailable leader at the forefront of the rebellion. "Amara," one of the Zilnari soldiers called out, her voice trembling. "What are you doing?" Amara's gaze was cold. "Fighting for the future of this planet. I will not be your puppet anymore." With a single motion, Amara activated the sabotage device that would bring down the Zilnari's command system. In an instant, the mainframe's power supply was severed, sending the central hub into darkness. The Zilnari's ability to coordinate their forces was completely lost. The rebellion surged forward. Alicia's strike team finally reached the heart of the central hub, the very core of the Zilnari's technological dominance over Earth. The last line of defense was before them, an impenetrable force field, powered by a massive energy generator. But it wasn't invulnerable. Amara, her eyes fierce with determination, stepped forward, wielding a device she had personally designed. It was a weapon of her own creation, one that could bypass the Zilnari's advanced shielding. The device hummed to life, sending a pulse of energy through the field. With a crack, the force field dissolved, and the path to the central command opened. "Let's finish this," Alicia whispered, leading the way. As they stormed the control center, they were met with one final line of defense: the hybrid elite, the very leaders who had stood as the Zilnari's most loyal servants. But they were no match for the united force before them. In an instant, the rebellion overwhelmed them, dismantling the last vestiges of the Zilnari's power. Alicia, standing at the heart of the shattered stronghold, felt a surge of triumph. They had done it. The Zilnari's hold on Earth was broken. The battle was won. But even in this moment of victory, Alicia knew there was more to be done. The war was over, but the fight for Earth's future had just begun. The sun was rising over a world forever changed. As the first light of day spilled across the horizon, it touched a planet freed from the shackles of alien domination. Alicia stood in the command center, looking out at the vast, untouched landscape that stretched before her. The war was over, but what now? What did Earth's future look like after so many years of manipulation, betrayal, and subjugation? The rebellion had won, but the cost had been high. There were empty spaces where fallen comrades used to stand. The resistance was no longer just a group of insurgents, it was the foundation of a new world. And while the Zilnari were defeated, the scars they left on the planet would remain for years to come. Alicia took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. The people who had fought beside her, the humans and hybrids alike, had endured unimaginable trials. They had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, but together they had reclaimed Earth. Beside her stood Amara, who had transformed from the leader of a manipulated empire to a symbol of defiance and strength. Her presence was a constant reminder of the cost of loyalty, how the promise of power had clouded her judgment, and how, in the end, it was only the truth that set her free. "What's next?" Amara asked quietly, breaking the silence. Alicia met her gaze, her heart heavy but resolute. "We rebuild. We unite what's left of Earth and ensure the Zilnari can never return. The rebuilt world." The days that followed the final battle were a whirlwind of activity. The Zilnari's stronghold had been reduced to rubble, and their communication systems were completely disabled. There was no longer any way for them to coordinate, no way for their forces to return. But despite their defeat, the remnants of their technology still posed a threat. The remaining hybrid elites, those who had pledged loyalty to the alien invaders, were still out there. They had been scattered, some retreating into the shadows, others defecting to the human cause. The time had come to ensure Earth's future wasn't dictated by remnants of their past. The task of rebuilding was daunting. The damage to the planet was significant. Cities lay in ruins, ecosystems had been disrupted, and entire populations had been displaced. But with the help of the defected hybrids, those who had sided with humanity, there was hope. Earth's technology, combined with the knowledge the hybrids possessed, provided a unique advantage. They had advanced biotechnology at their disposal, tools to heal the planet, restore balance, and begin the process of rehabilitation. For the first time in a long while, there was a sense of hope among the people. The world was no longer divided by the alien influence. It was a world where humanity could stand on its own once more. The First Council. One of the first steps in the reconstruction of Earth was the formation of a new governing body. The First Council, a coalition of human leaders and hybrid defectors, would oversee the planet's recovery and the rebuilding of its societies. It was a delicate process. Humanity and the hybrids had to find common ground, understanding that their shared future depended on cooperation. Alicia, though not interested in power for herself, was selected as one of the Council's primary members. Her leadership in the rebellion had earned her respect, and her telepathic abilities had become invaluable in helping to mediate disputes between humans and hybrids. Amara, who had once been seen as the pinnacle of the hybrid elite, now stood beside Alicia as a key figure in the Council's formation. Together, they would ensure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. The Council meetings were often tense, with factions still wary of one another. The hybrids, even those who had fought for the rebellion, had grown up with a sense of superiority, believing themselves to be the future of Earth. Many humans had been unwilling to trust them, fearful that the hybrids would return to their old loyalties. But over time, the Council's work began to show results. Earth's infrastructure was slowly restored, and new technologies began to flourish as humans and hybrids worked together. The hybrid defectors, now freed from their previous constraints, helped develop solutions to environmental damage, using their alien knowledge to repair ecosystems and heal the scars left by the Zilnari's exploitation. A new era. In the months that followed, Alicia found herself growing increasingly restless. The war had given her purpose, but now that peace had been established, she didn't know where she fit in. The resistance fighters who had once looked to her for guidance were now rebuilding their homes and lives. The threat of the Zilnari was gone, but so too was the singular mission that had driven them all. One evening, as she wandered the grounds of the new headquarters, now a thriving base of operations for the Council, Alicia encountered Amara once more. Amara was gazing out at the distant horizon, the soft glow of the setting sun casting long shadows over the land. She had changed in ways Alicia had never imagined. The arrogance that once defined her had been replaced with a quiet strength, an understanding of what true leadership meant. "You've been quiet," Amara observed, turning to face her. Alicia shrugged, feeling the weight of her own thoughts. "I'm not sure where we go from here. We won the war. But now we have to live with the consequences." Amara's gaze softened. "We all have to live with the past, Alicia. But we can shape the future. Together." For a moment, Alicia didn't respond. She had always seen herself as a tool of the rebellion, someone who fought for a cause and never questioned the greater meaning. But now that the war was over, she found herself searching for something more, something beyond the fight. "Do you ever wonder," Alicia asked, her voice quiet, "what the future will look like for us? For Earth?" Amara smiled, a small, genuine expression that spoke volumes. "I think about it every day. We've lost so much, but we've gained something too. We've learned how to fight for what's right. And we've learned how to live with each other, despite our differences." Alicia nodded. "It's not going to be easy, but maybe we can build something new. Something better." The challenge of unity. The Council's work continued as the years passed, but Earth was not without its challenges. The hybrid elites who had once sworn loyalty to the Zilnari did not all immediately accept the new order. Some of the defectors struggled with their place in the new world, while others attempted to rally the remaining loyalists for a final stand. These pockets of resistance were small, but they could not be ignored. But with Alicia, Amara, and the Council leading the charge, the planet continued to heal. The hybrid defectors who had once been manipulated were now seen as integral members of society, helping to bridge the divide between their people and humans. The lessons they had learned during the rebellion were invaluable in ensuring the planet's survival. The world had changed, beyond recognition perhaps, but it had also begun to grow, to adapt. Earth, freed from the shackles of the Zilnari, now had the chance to define its own destiny. A final message. One day, Alicia stood before the Council, watching as the leaders of both humanity and the hybrids came together to finalize a new treaty. The language of unity and cooperation was on the table, and for the first time, there was no divide. As she spoke to the assembled members, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. They had done it. Together, they had brought Earth back from the brink of destruction, and now they stood on the cusp of something extraordinary. "We are not just survivors of a war," Alicia said, her voice steady and resolute. "We are the architects of a new world. Our victory is not just over the Zilnari, it is over the darkness within ourselves. The future is ours to shape. And I believe that together, we will create something far greater than what came before." As the council members nodded in agreement, Alicia couldn't help but smile. The fight had been long, but in the end it had been worth it. Earth had been reborn. As Earth began its slow and deliberate recovery, a new challenge emerged. The unification of humans and hybrids had not only created a stronger foundation for rebuilding, but it also unearthed tensions, old fears, and deep-seated prejudices that had long simmered beneath the surface. While the war was over, the scars left by years of oppression, manipulation, and betrayal would not heal easily. There were some who could not forget that for so long, they had been subjects under the alien thumb, their lives controlled by the Zilnari and their hybrid soldiers. Alicia was well aware of the difficulties ahead. Although she had stood at the forefront of the rebellion, she knew that her victory had been as much about securing the future as it had been about dismantling the Zilnari Empire. The true test of her leadership would be found in the peace that followed, in the way she would handle the delicate balance between old and new, the resistance fighters, and the hybrids who now worked alongside them. A fragile peace. The council's meetings, once filled with excitement and the promise of a united future, now carried a different tone. There were murmurs of doubt, flickers of distrust that sometimes flared up during discussions. Human delegates were still wary of the hybrids, unsure if they had truly cast aside their past loyalties. The hybrids, in turn, struggled to fully integrate into human society. Many had spent their lives in the shadow of the Zilnari's empire, raised to see themselves as superior to humans. The road ahead was long. Alicia understood this better than anyone. It wasn't enough to simply defeat the Zilnari. The real work was in healing the wounds left behind, in teaching people to trust one another, to rebuild not just the physical infrastructure, but the social and psychological bonds that had been shattered. The hybrid struggle. Amara, once the symbol of the hybrid elite's power, had become a bridge between the two worlds, but even she struggled at times. The loyalty she had once pledged to the Zilnari was not so easily erased. Though she had helped bring down the empire that had manipulated her, some still viewed her with suspicion. And for her part, she knew that her own people, those who had once fought alongside the Zilnari, were torn between their newfound freedom and the weight of their past. "Do you think they'll ever fully accept us?" Amara asked one evening, her voice quiet as she sat with Alicia beneath the stars. Alicia knew exactly what she meant. They had spent years fighting for survival, but now they were in a different kind of battle. One for trust, for forgiveness, for a future where people could live side by side regardless of their origins. "It won't be easy," Alicia admitted, staring out at the quiet horizon. "But we don't need them to accept us all at once. We just need them to try." Amara nodded, though there was an ache in her eyes. "I've spent so much time trying to prove I'm not what I used to be. But some days I wonder if it's enough." "It will be," Alicia reassured her. "You're not alone in this. The seeds of change." The day came when the council held a meeting that would determine the next step in Earth's rebuilding process. The nations of Earth, once fractured and divided, had begun to heal, but there was still so much work to be done. Alicia's voice carried weight now, her influence not just as a former resistance leader, but as someone who had seen the horrors of war firsthand. She knew better than anyone how fleeting peace could be, and she vowed to ensure that Earth's future would not be dictated by the same forces that had once sought to conquer it. As she stood before the council, the weight of her role in shaping Earth's future was palpable. The hybrid delegates sat to her left, the human leaders to her right. There was no more distinction between the two, just leaders all with the same goal in mind: the unification of Earth. "Now that we've secured the peace," Alicia began, her voice steady, "it's time we focus on the next generation. We need to ensure that what we've fought for doesn't just survive, it thrives. We have to teach our children to live in harmony, to look past what divides us and see what unites us. We are Earth's future. And if we cannot learn to coexist, then everything we've fought for will be meaningless." Her words resonated through the room. The other members of the council nodded in agreement, their resolve firm. For the first time, they weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the possibility of something better. A gathering of hope. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The world began to shift in ways that could never have been predicted. Former battlefields were transformed into training grounds for young minds, humans and hybrids alike. Education became a cornerstone of the new society, with an emphasis on unity and cooperation. Children were taught not just the history of the Zilnari occupation, but also the history of resilience, of rebellion, of what it meant to be human, to be alive in a world of peace. Elisha, though she remained deeply involved in the council's work, took time to visit schools and communities, offering her guidance to the next generation. She would often find herself watching as children, those who had never known the horrors of war, played together, their laughter echoing in the streets. In those moments, Elisha felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. The kind of hope that was built not just on the victory of war, but on the belief that the future could be better than the past. Amara too found herself drawn to these places. She had once been an instrument of war, a tool used by the Zilnari. But now she was a mentor, helping guide the children who saw her as a figure of strength rather than a symbol of oppression. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. The final test. Even with the progress made, there remained those who could not let go of the past. A small faction of disgruntled survivors, some human and some hybrid, rose in opposition to the council. They feared that the blending of species would only lead to humanity's extinction, that the hybrids would one day claim Earth for themselves. These radicals became a thorn in the side of the council, disrupting meetings, spreading fear, and stirring up unrest. Elisha knew that the peace was fragile, and that even the smallest spark could reignite a conflict that had cost so many lives. She had to act, but with caution. This wasn't a war of weapons, it was a war for hearts and minds. One fateful day, she stood before a crowd of humans and hybrids who had gathered in protest. The air was thick with tension, and it seemed as if the fragile peace was on the verge of unraveling. "I understand your fear," Elisha said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "But fear is not the answer. We've fought too long for something better, for a world where we can live together, not as enemies but as equals. We cannot let the mistakes of the past define our future. This world, our world, is worth fighting for. And we will not let it fall into chaos." Her words rang out, cutting through the noise and the anger. Slowly the crowd began to quiet, the tension lifting. Elisha's voice became a beacon, a reminder that peace was not simply the absence of war. It was a conscious choice, an ongoing struggle for understanding and compassion. A new beginning. Years passed and the world transformed. Earth, once on the brink of annihilation, was now flourishing. The scars of war had not vanished completely, but they had faded into the background of a society that was rebuilding itself, brick by brick, heart by heart. The children who had once played in the shadow of destruction now grew up in a world of promise. They learned not just to survive but to thrive, together. And for Elisha, Amara, and the countless others who had fought for this future, the victory was not just in the defeat of the Zilnari, it was in the knowledge that, despite everything, Earth had chosen hope over fear, unity over division. As Elisha gazed out at the horizon once more, she saw a world that was no longer ruled by aliens or hybrid elites, but by the people who had fought for their freedom. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.